Welcome, everyone. You are joining the meetup for New Paltz Climate Smart. And tonight, the topic is cryptocurrency and much more. So we're going to just wait a couple minutes while we let in people. We had a lot of interest in this, which we're excited about. And we are recording this, this presentation tonight. If you would like to pop your name and where you're from in the chat, that would be a great way for us as the host to know who's joined us tonight. We're really glad you're here. New Paltz Climate Smart hosts once a month meetups on a whole variety of topics. And we've been doing this now for more than 2 years. So we've hit on a wide range of topics. And I actually, once in a while, I get a little nervous, like, oh, what's something new and fresh? And then there's always something that takes its place. And this is a topic I just started to learn a little bit about myself, and really excited that we were able to find a speaker with more knowledge than myself. So I'm still admitting people, but we'll get started soon. Do pop your name and where you're from in the chat if you'd like. And my name is Janelle Piotr, and I'm the coordinator for New Paltz Climate Smart. And we also have with us tonight, we're doing technical assistance, Jess Mullen, and she's the coordinator for the Climate Action Coalition in New Paltz. And in just a moment, I'll be introducing our main speaker for this evening. Very exciting to see so many people joining us. We have almost 30 people at this point, and I think we have a lot more coming in.
Janelle, some of the folks that are messaging me versus I think everyone is Fred from Albany and Joanna and Eric in San Diego. Great. Penny from Ithaca and David from Ithaca, Eco Village Ithaca.
Excellent. Great to see an audience from all over our state. And I'm actually joining you tonight from Wisconsin. So while the pandemic has been awful, at least technology allows us to do these kinds of meetings no matter where we are, which is quite nice. Welcome, Layla. So we now have 32 folks, and I have a feeling we're going to just keep getting a few more. So very glad to have you all here tonight. Thank you for putting your name and where you're from in the chat. If you're interested in continuing to get or starting to get the New Paltz Climate Smart newsletter, I do mail that out once a month. It has all the information about our monthly meetups, our monthly Climate Smart book club, and what's going on in New Paltz in terms of Climate Smart. Please do, if you're interested in that newsletter and don't already get it, send us as the hosts your email address, and we'll be sure to add you to our mailing list. You can also sign up if you didn't come via Meetup. Meetup is an online platform. You could sign up for our group on the Meetup platform, and that is the New Paltz Climate Solutions. So I am going to, at this point, it's a minute after 5, get us rolling here. We are a 90-minute program, and the first 45 minutes to an hour will be our presentation, and then we will have an opportunity for questions and answers and discussion. So I would like to introduce our main speaker tonight, and that is Irene Weiser. And Irene, for the past 10 years, has been the coordinator of Fossil Free Tompkins, which, among other things, has won fights to choose a local coal burning power plant and to stop a local gas pipeline. In addition, she served as a town board member in the town of Caroline from 2012 to 2020. And I'm going to let Irene go ahead and tell us more about yourself and your presentation this evening. Thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, Janelle, thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who is sharing your dinner with me in this conversation tonight. It's really great. And a few of you have written me in the chat to say that you're eating and so off screen, and I totally get it. And it's really, really fine. And I'm just really glad that there's so much interest in this. And I'm really sad that we still have to keep fighting to protect our planet. But I feel heartened in being joined by all of you. So I don't know, I guess I can go ahead and get started, Janelle. I know that there's probably people who are, like I usually am, joining just a few minutes late. So I want to keep talking just a little bit to let a few more people come join. And yet at the same time, I know that I don't want to keep everybody here waiting.
Maybe you can start by putting your first slide with that beautiful graphic.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So I will start by sharing my screen, and then we'll go from there. So here we are. And I suspect that many of you have this gray bar at the top right now, so it's gonna get worse before it gets better. But I am going to hopefully make that disappear. All right. So in just a moment, it should be, uh-oh.
And I'm excited that I think we're going to beat a new record for our New Paltz Climate Smart meetup participant numbers. We are at a nice round 50 in just a second here.
Wow. Okay. We'll give it another minute or two.
And Mark, welcome. You just made our 50th participant.
So there's something a little weird happening, and this is mostly to my co-hosts. I keep hitting hide floating meeting controls, and it does that for a minute, and then it comes back. Is anybody pressing the escape button? Because that's what would make it come
on
back.
now. You're good. Irene, it's all set.
Yeah, I know, but it keeps coming back.
Oh.
Do you want to maybe move it down to like the bottom, like as low as possible, so it's not, you know, as prominent?
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to be a great place for it either, because when I do videos, I'm going to have to.
Well, they're talking technology. Welcome if you've just joined us. I'm Janelle Piotr, the host tonight and the volunteer coordinator for New Paltz Climate Smart. And we're asking, we have a large group tonight, so we are asking people to put their name and where they're from in the chat. And if you are not already receiving the New Paltz Climate Smart newsletter and would like to get that once a month, be sure to give me your email in the chat too. So, and we'll be sure to add you. And we'll be getting started in just a moment with our presentation. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain, the promise, and the peril. And Irene Weiser is our presenter tonight.
All right. Well, I think enough stalling. Let's get the show on the road. Again, thank you to all of you for being here tonight and for your interest in this topic. I'm happy to be able to talk with you about it tonight. So first we'll talk about what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you a little of an overview. We're going to talk first about what blockchain is, and I'm going to do that by way of a short video because I'm not really an expert on that either, and the video does a much better job than I will at explaining it. We'll talk a little bit about the promise of some of the blockchain technologies known as cryptocurrency and smart contracts. we'll certainly spend quite a bit more time talking about the problems, a little bit on the societal issues, and again, much more time spent on the environmental problems. And by the time we get to these later topics about proof of work, blockchain mining, you will know what that means thanks to the videos that I'll be showing you. And then we'll finish up with some actions to take. So starting with some disclaimers, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not an economist. I'm not here to endorse any particular kind of cryptocurrency or cryptocurrency in general. The purpose of our meeting tonight is first to learn some basic vocabulary that we can, so we'll have a shared understanding of what we're all talking about, and then to focus on blockchain's impact on reaching New York's greenhouse gas reduction and renewable energy goals, and to identify some actions you can take. So I'm going to start with a video that answers, I think, in a helpful way, what is blockchain?
Many people think of blockchain as the technology that powers Bitcoin. While this was its original purpose, blockchain is capable of so much more. Despite the sound of the word, there's not just one blockchain. Blockchain is shorthand for a whole suite of distributed ledger technologies that can be programmed to record and track anything of value, from financial transactions to medical records or even land titles. You might be thinking, we already have processes in place to track data. What's so special about blockchain? Let's break down the reasons why blockchain technology stands to revolutionize the way we interact with each other. Reason number one, the way it tracks and stores data. Blockchain stores information in batches called blocks that are linked together in a chronological fashion to form a continuous line, metaphorically, a chain of blocks. If you make a change to the information recorded in a particular block, you don't rewrite it. Instead, the change is stored in a new block showing that X changed to Y at a particular date and time. Sound familiar? That's because blockchain is based on the centuries-old method of the general financial ledger. It's a non-destructive way to track data changes over time. Here's one example. Let's say there was a dispute between Anne and her brother Steve over who owns a piece of land that's been in the family for years. Because blockchain technology uses the ledger method, there is an entry in the ledger showing that Adam first owned the property in 1900. When Adam sold the property to Dave in 1930, a new entry was made in the ledger, and so on. Every change of ownership of this property is represented by a new entry in the ledger, right up until Anne bought it from their father in 2007. Anne is the current owner, and we can see that history in the ledger. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Unlike the age-old ledger method, originally a book, then a database file stored on a single system, blockchain was designed to be decentralized and distributed across a large network of computers. This decentralizing of information reduces the ability for data tampering and brings us to the second factor that makes blockchain unique. It creates trust in the data. Before a block can be added to the chain, a few things have to happen. First, a cryptographic puzzle must be solved, thus creating the block. The computer that solves the puzzle shares the solution to all of the other computers on the network. This is called proof of work. The network will then verify this proof of work, and if correct, the block will be added to the chain. The combination of these complex math puzzles and verification by many computers ensures that we can trust each and every block on the chain. Because the network does the trust building for us, we now have the opportunity to interact directly with our data in real time. And that brings us to the third reason blockchain technology is such a game changer. No more intermediaries. Currently, when doing business with one another, we don't show the other person our financial or business records. Instead, we rely on trusted intermediaries, such as a bank or lawyer, to view our records and keep that information confidential. These intermediaries build trust between the parties and are able to verify, for example, that yes, Anne is the rightful owner of this land. This approach limits exposure and risk, but also adds another step to the exchange, which means more time and money spent. If Anne's land title information was stored in a blockchain, she could cut out the middleman, her lawyer, who would ordinarily confirm her information with Steve. As we now know, all blocks added to the chain have been verified to be true and can't be tampered with, so Anne can simply show Steve her land title information secured on the blockchain. Anne would save considerable time and money by cutting out the middleman. This type of trusted peer-to-peer interaction with our data can revolutionize the way we access, verify, and transact with one another. And because blockchain is a type of technology and not a single network, it can be implemented in many different ways. Some blockchains can be completely public and open to everyone to view and access. Others can be closed to a select group of authorized users, such as your company, a group of banks, or government agencies. And there are hybrid public-private blockchains too. In some, those with private access can see all the data, while the public can see only selections. In others, everyone can see all the data, but only some people have access to add new data. A government, for example, could use a hybrid system to record the boundaries of Anne's property and the fact that she owns it while keeping her personal information private. Or it could allow everyone to view property records, but reserve to itself the exclusive right to update them. It is the combination of all these factors, decentralizing of the data, building trust in the data, and allowing us to interact directly with one another and the data that gives blockchain technology the potential to underpin many of the ways we interact with one another. But, much like the rise of the internet, this technology will bring with it all kinds of complex policy questions around governance, international law, security, and economics.
I'm going to stop it here and just add that the one thing they're not talking about, in addition to governance and international law and security and economics, is the one that I think brought many of us here tonight, which is concerns about the environmental issues. So I'm going to try and get us out of this video now and on to the next slide that identify. We just watched a video a little bit ago that identified key features of blockchain. And they include that it's a decentralized electronic ledger, that it doesn't allow intermediaries or doesn't involve intermediaries for transaction. Rather, the transactions are peer-to-peer. The transactions are transparent. It uses a process called mining. They talked about solving a cryptographic puzzle or a math problem to add blocks to the chain, and the miner is paid a transaction fee for doing that. The chain itself is secure and immutable, and there can be different kinds of blockchains, public, private, and a combination hybrid. And some of the basic uses for blockchains are for smart contracts and for cryptocurrency. So I wish I could spend more time on smart contracts because I find them to be really exciting, and I think there's a big future in smart contracts for blockchain technologies. They're often private or hybrid. They usually don't rely on a complex math algorithm known as proof of work. It more often uses something called proof of stake, and we'll get to a little video that describes those in a minute. Some examples of smart contracts is that it can be used for a supply chain to certify and verify that something is being sold as fair trade or organic or fair labor practices, etc. Some of you may have on your phones a passport showing you've been vaccinated, the New York State Excelsior COVID passport. That runs on a blockchain system. A really exciting application has been in Brooklyn since 2016. There's been a peer-to-peer solar microgrid where Some residents have solar on their rooftop and they're able to sell extra energy that they generate to their neighbors. So that's a really sweet application. And as was talked about in the video, it's also being used for indexing deeds and titles, and hopefully one day it won't take so long to buy a piece of property. So what is cryptocurrency? It's a digital money. There are some 600 plus brands. Bitcoin is the leading brand with about 45% market share, and I believe valued over $1 trillion collectively at this point. It's a very interesting kind of entity. It's for some people, they use it as money, and there are ways you can use Bitcoin to purchase goods or services online. For other people, they use it as an investment, sort of like buying stock. They purchase cryptocurrency, and the value of it has escalated over time. It's quite volatile, but at one point earlier this month, it was valued over 60,000. I think it's now down in the 40,000s per Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is also a platform and on which other currencies run and some smart contract systems run. You can think of a platform as sort of like with your, if you have an iPhone, iOS is the platform that, or operating system that runs your phone, and that all the other applications are built on. And so it's a little bit similar, and probably if there's real technology people on here, I didn't get it perfect, but that's a rough idea of what that means. So the promise and the peril of cryptocurrency. It promises a peer-to-peer network with no intermediary, and the ability to democratize money and trade. And I have to say, it's a wonderful vision. It excites me. The idea is that there would be faster, lower cost transactions. It would make banking accessible to people in developing countries. It would be a hedge against inflation in countries, where inflation goes through the roof, and your cash holdings, are massively devalued. And it would in effect create a universal currency. So I find it really exciting in these promises, but to date, in my opinion, it hasn't delivered. It's not peer-to-peer, and as we'll see more later, it is largely made up by moneyed investors. It's enormously volatile and has no inherent value. So, its value could go to zero without any bank to back it up or anything else. It is subject to hacking, fraud, pyramid, Ponzi schemes. I will say that as far as I know, the chain itself has not been hacked. But the mobile apps that you use to get into your blockchain or your wallet get hacked. There's just in the news today, somebody who was able to steal millions of dollars. It's also been a hiding place for dark money and for criminal enterprise to enter the system, because while the transactions are transparent, the identity of the people behind them is not. And last, and obviously this is where we're going to spend a lot of the conversation, is the environmental impacts. So what is this stuff, proof of stake, proof of work, and mining that I've been talking about? And I'm going to again use the help of a video to get to the answer to that question.
Hey there, my name is Xavier, and you might have read articles online saying that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin uses enormous amounts of electricity to secure their networks. But why is that? And more importantly, what are the alternatives? Mining new coins takes a lot of computing power because of the proof of work algorithm. The idea was first introduced in 1993 to combat spam emails and was formally called proof of work in 1997. However, the technique went largely unused until Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin in 2009. He realized that this mechanism could be used to reach consensus between many nodes on a network, and he used it as a way to secure the Bitcoin blockchain. However, the proof-of-work algorithm works by having all nodes solve a cryptographic puzzle. This puzzle is solved by miners, and the first one to find a solution gets the miner reward. And this has led to a situation where people are building larger and larger mining farms like this one. According to Digiconomist, Bitcoin miners alone uses about 54 terawatt hours of electricity, enough to power 5 million households in the US or even power the entire country of New Zealand or Hungary. But it doesn't stop there. Proof of work gives more rewards to people with better and more equipment. The higher your hash rate is, the higher the chance that you'll have to create the next block and thus receiving the mining reward. To increase chances even further, miners can come together in what's called mining pools. They combine their hashing power and distribute the awards evenly across everyone in the pool. So to sum it up, proof of work is causing miners to use massive amounts of electricity, and it encourages the use of mining pools, which makes the blockchain more centralized as opposed to decentralized. So to solve these issues, we have to find a new consensus algorithm that is as effective or better than proof of work. In 2011, a Bitcoin Talk forum user called Quantum Mechanic proposed a new technique that he called proof of stake. The basic idea is that letting everyone compete against each other with mining is just wasteful. So instead, proof of work uses an election process in which one node is randomly chosen to validate the next block.
So I just want to point out, he actually misspoke here. It's proof of stake that does this random selection. He then gets into a bunch of kind of more geeky stuff. So I'm going to fast forward us to 428, where we'll pick up on a summary, good enough, of the differences between proof of stake and proof of work.
Actually fraudulent. So the difference between proof of work and proof of stake are quite significant. Proof of stake doesn't let everyone mine for new blocks and therefore uses considerably less energy. It's also more decentralized. How is that? Well, in proof of work, we have something called mining pools. Those are people who are teaming up to increase their chances of mining a new block and thus collecting a reward. However, these pools now control large portions of the Bitcoin blockchain. They centralize the mining process, and that could be very dangerous. If the three biggest mining pools would merge together, they would have a majority in the network and could start approving fraudulent transactions. Another important advantage is that setting up a node for a proof of stake based blockchain is a lot less expensive compared to a proof of work based one. You don't need expensive mining equipment, and thus proof of stake encourages more people to set up a node, making the network more decentralized and also more secure. But even proof of stake isn't.
All right, so let's see, out of this video and back to the slideshow. So I hope that gives you at least a little bit of a sense of the vocabulary and what we're talking about, that the proof of work involves a competition to solve these cryptographic puzzles or math problems. I've heard it jokingly referred to that it's the job of these machines to guess a number between 1 and infinity, and whichever one guesses it first gets to verify the block. So the machines that do that are specialized computers. They're not regular little computers. They're these ASIC machines, and they are put into any number of facilities, but it's not uncommon for them to be housed in old shipping containers. And a shipping container can hold roughly 700 of these machines. This picture in the lower right is of the old Alcoa plant in Messina, New York, where one of the largest crypto mining projects in New York State. And in fact, here's a little bit of a story on that plant for you to get a better sense of what it is and how it operates and how they make money.
The inside of this former aluminum smelting facility looks different now.
Most people, when they first walk in, it seems a little bit crazy to putting in a digital currency data center here. But for us, the more we've done it, the more we believe that it made a lot of sense.
A first difference. The old boss that ran these halls is replaced with Peril. He's a blockchain entrepreneur who co-founded the company that now rents the space, CoinMint.
We create a modularized data center inside of the building. You'll see, right under 700 machines in each container. They're fairly simple machines. It's a computer server that's specifically built to perform the cryptography functions. 3 hashing boards, control board, and fans to cool it.
These computers are verifying Bitcoin transactions and adding them to the network's public ledger. This process is called mining. It's what generates new Bitcoins, which are created as a reward for the miners.
The amount of heat that comes out of a 1400 watt hairdryer is about the equivalent amount of heat that comes out of one of the machines. So if you step into the exhaust container and you want to envision 700 1400 watt hairdryers blowing into it, the thing that we need to do is get that heat out of the building.
And as it turns out, this building is really damn good at that. Cool air flows into the rooms from the open floors,
Goes up to the vaulted ceiling and out the mono duct.
sending that exhaust outside where it won't overheat the machines.
The dam is within around 5 miles of here, so there's transmission lines that run their 115,000 volt. 3 transformers here connected to those transmission lines. Inside the pot rooms, there's connect to additional transformers which step it down to the electricity that can be used for our machines.
Rather than buying power from a local utility, CoinMint went straight to the source.
We buy electricity on the open markets at market rate on a similar playing field that, or the same playing field that on a regular utility would.
Their cost, at the time of this writing, is $26.67 per megawatt hour. That's a huge savings compared to the statewide retail average of about $200 per megawatt hour.
In the Bitcoin network, approximately every 10 minutes, a new block is generated. The miner that solves the hash for that block basically will get the reward. The current reward is 12.5 Bitcoins, plus the transaction fees for that 10-minute period.
The reward will go down over the years. And while Leary won't say just how many Bitcoins are generated here every day, he does say he is keen on the transaction fees.
So the transaction fees can be half a Bitcoin up to, I think, back in December when the network was going crazy, we saw as much as 6-7 Bitcoins could be the transaction fees. There will be a point where transaction fees will become greater than the base mining reward. It'll be interesting to see, how it all plays out.
So that was a plant up in Messina on the St. Lawrence River. It's one of the largest crypto mining facilities in the country. And it's using our hydropower to do that. So there are, again, we are going to delve into in depth to the energy issues related to crypto mining. But I also just want to point up some of the other very real environmental problems. One of which is e-waste. These processors that they use in these mining facilities, 2 things happen. One is because they're used 24/7, 365 and operate at hot temperatures and are working hard, they burn out quickly. They die, a year and a half is their lifespan. Also, newer and faster comes out, and people want to get the newer and faster so that they can be, more competitive. So for both of those reasons, there's lots of e-waste. The ways that Bitcoin mining is talked about, it's kind of staggering. They don't talk about how many tons or how many, dumpsters full. They talk about that it rivals the amount of waste of entire countries. And you'll hear this too in terms of the amount of energy that Bitcoin processing uses, that it rivals the energy use of entire countries. There are also problems, as you can imagine. These are a bunch of shipping containers that are stacked, and they have big fans that blow through to keep the containers cool. These fans make an enormous amount of noise. And then there are also water impacts. This is a picture of the water withdrawal pipe from Seneca Lake, where the Greenwich power plant / Bitcoin mining facility is located. And it takes in millions of gallons of water a day from the lake. It macerates who knows how many fish and frogs on the way in. And then on the way out, it discharges water into a trout stream. And that water, because it is used actually to cool the generators that are powering the power plant that's using the power to mine the Bitcoin, that water that's coming out is very high temperature, and it's being discharged into a nearby trout stream. So now I'm going to talk more in depth about the impacts of crypto mining on our ability to reach our climate goals. So many of you know the New York State is one of the states leading the nation in our targets for renewable energy as defined by the New York State law, the Climate Community and Protection Act. And those targets are that we reach 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% emissions free by 2040, and 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So here's the challenge. We're here now. The total renewable energy is barely 20%. We got to get up to here in 8 years. And it gets even more complicated when you think our main sources of greenhouse gas emissions, transportation and our housing, have to be converted over to electricity. So that means that we're going to increase the amount of electricity that we need at the same time as we're trying to build up the renewables and reduce our emissions. This number here in the red box, we're going to see it again soon. So just remember 150,000 gigawatts. So gigawatt hours are the way that we talk about how much electricity is being used. This blue line represents the forecast of the increase that we will likely have in making the conversion to everything electric. This green line is if we're good at being energy efficient. You can see it's a much more conservative amount of extra electricity that we'll need. On the other hand, if we're not energy efficient, it could be as much as a 50% increase in our electric demand. So what does our energy supply look like now? It's sort of like this. It's 70% from fossil fuels, mostly dual fuel generators that burn both gas and oil. Some of them just burn gas and some of them just burn oil. And we have 25% zero emission, and that's made up of nuclear, hydro, wind, and just a little bit of solar and pump storage. And where we have to get to, again, this is in 8 years, is most of this energy coming from intermittent renewables of land-based wind and offshore wind, 2% from rooftop solar, 7% from larger solar installations. We'll still keep the hydro and the nuclear. We are also going to be importing some resources, likely from Canada, that would likely also be a hydro resource. We have to build out short-term storage, and 10% is stuff, honestly, that's still in development for long-duration storage. So to put some of that in perspective, the 15 New York ISO, which is the group that manages the grid, the New York Independent System Operator, says that to reach those goals, we need 15,000 megawatts of solar installed. And at roughly 6 acres per megawatt, that means that we have to cover 141 square miles in solar. And for wind, land-based wind, which is part of the 2030 goal, offshore wind isn't until 2035, and so those aren't figured in here. But land-based wind at 4 megawatts a turbine comes up to roughly almost 2,200 turbines that we need to install. And that's no small task. Turbines are bigger than the Statue of Liberty. They have to be spaced apart to allow, they don't clank into each other, and to allow the wind turbulence to die down, which means that they're going to need 940 square miles of land to situate them. So we've got an enormous task in front of us to meet our renewable energy goals. So this slide has changed several times just in the past couple of days. And the reason is because there seem to be more and more crypto mining facilities that are making the news. Some of them have already been there. We just haven't known about it. And so this list on the left of all the different mining facilities has gotten longer just in the past couple of days. There are three kind of things that we see happening. We see, like at the Messina plant that we saw the video on, and also in Mechanicsville, we see some crypto mining that's using hydro directly. There are some crypto mining plants. This is in Niagara Falls area at the old DuPont factory area. And I counted, I think it was 18 storage containers. And if we consider that they each hold 700 of the computer processors, that's a pretty big facility. Anyhow, while they're in the area of Niagara Falls, they pull energy off the grid. And so that's another method that power plants use. And then the third is what we've seen at Seneca Lake, which is a power plant that it was an old retired power plant that came back to life and is now generating electricity to feed the crypto mining operation that's going on their facilities. So I'm not going to go through this whole list of different plants, but what I want to do is let you know that some of these are approved, some of these are already built and operating. If you total it up, and there's some that we just don't know how many megawatts they would be using. But if you total up what we know about and add in some of the ones that plan to expand, there's a potential for up to 1,300 megawatts of crypto mining that is either planned or already happening in New York. So you might ask, why upstate New York? I'm going to move this so we can see the lower picture. Upstate gets a lot of its electricity from hydro and nuclear power. And the New York ISO talks about this as the tale of two states. That upstate New York gets most of its electricity, and that's the one on the left here, from what they consider to be green sources of hydro and nuclear and wind. Whereas downstate, the New York City area, has much more in the way of fossil fuel plants providing them their power. So when crypto plants set up here, they get bragging rights to say that they are carbon free. We also have a relatively cool climate. As you saw, that's important for keeping the machines cool, and the less your costs are for doing, the cooler the climate, the less your costs are for doing that. We also have overall low wholesale electric costs up here. Certainly our electric bills are far less than they are down in New York City. We have a lot of economically struggling towns up here that want the jobs and want the tax revenues. And the result is that almost 20% of Bitcoin miners are happening in upstate New York. Now, this wasn't always the case. And here's a graph that shows what happened just earlier this year this big yellow patch is mainland China. And some of you may have heard that China, of all places, China stopped crypto mining from happening, allegedly because of the environmental impacts and that it was just taking up too much energy in their country. I have to wonder if it also wasn't because of some of these, you know, ways that cryptocurrencies can undermine governmental regulation of money. But in any case, China said, no, we're done. We're done with mining. And so what you now see is, where has the mining happened since China said no? And that's just this little segment of graph to the right of the orange. And if you look, the biggest portion of that, of the increase, who picked up the business when China said no, is the United States. And if you want to see where in the United States the most mining is happening, here's a map that shows that it's happening largely in New York State, in Texas. This map actually may not be fully accurate because this is based on one pool of miners. And remember, they talked about how you can bundle up and have different groups do mining into a pool. So this is a map of the mining pool for one group called Foundry. But there are other miners in Texas that don't participate in the Foundry pool. But anyhow, you can see that Texas, New York, Georgia, Kentucky, and Oklahoma, no, my geography is failing me at the moment. Anyhow, you can see where the hotbeds are. So I now want to put that 1,300 megawatts of mining into perspective. Remember I told you there was that number of 150,000 gigawatt hours that I wanted you to remember? Well, here it is again, because I took this 1,300 megawatts and I multiplied it by the number of hours in a year. And it comes out that it would be 11,423 gigawatt hours dedicated to crypto mining if all of those plans and all of those mining plants came to fruition. We would be using more than 7% of New York's total energy use for the year, for this past year. More than 7% would be dedicated to crypto mining. And I want to point out, this right now is a what if scenario. It's not yet happening. But if the state doesn't take action and all of these proposed plants start to operate, and we just basically open the gate and allow crypto mining to go unchecked, it's going to be disastrous. It's going to be disastrous for us to reach our climate goals. And so, you know, the bottom line is that crypto mining using the proof of work method is unsustainable. It has an insatiable energy appetite, and like a Pac-Man running around the track, these Bitcoin mining operations will gobble up all of the energy that we can provide off of our grid, whether it's renewable, whether it's hydro, whether they're just drawing down from the grid, whatever the grid mix is in that area. The money that they can make right now, you heard them talk about, I think it was 12 Bitcoins, 12.5 Bitcoins per transaction that they complete. That has been halved. It's now 6.25 Bitcoins that you can win for completing a transaction, but it's still a lot. So it's unsustainable for us to continue in this way. So the crypto miners will come up with various scenarios that they think sound good. And they may or may not even know better. One is that they'll say they'll build solar. And we've heard that actually from the Cayuga power plant here, that, well, they'll put in 100 megawatts, maybe even 200 megawatts of solar. But what I want to point out is 100 megawatts of electricity from the grid is not the same as putting in 100 megawatts of solar. And it's because of this thing over here on the circle graph called capacity factor. Capacity factor has to do with how much you actually generate versus how much you possibly maybe could. And nuclear power operates almost all the time. And they do have to shut down on occasion for maintenance and repairs. But mostly they operate. And so their capacity factor is considered 95%. When you look at solar, the capacity factor is rated at 14%. Well, we know that capacity for solar, actual versus ideal is cut in half right away down to 50% just because it's dark half the time. Then if you look at this graph here that shows how solar production happens throughout the day, you can see that even when there's only a part of the day where it's peaking, and the rest of the day it's on a slope. And so overall, the New York ISO says the capacity factor for solar is 14%. So that means for 100 megawatts of installed solar, you have to divide it by that 14%, which means to make the equivalent of 100 megawatts in the grid requires 714 megawatts of solar panels installed, which is almost 7 almost 7 square miles. And if we look at that as the total solar for the state, remember the state said that we needed 15,000 megawatts of solar throughout the whole state to reach our goals. Just this one bit of replacing 100 megawatts needing to go to 714 is almost a 5% increase in the total solar we need to install in the state. So for any of these crypto miners to say that, oh, they'll go solar, just 100 megawatts puts us up almost 5% over what we already need to build. It's untenable. Then there's the plants that say it's okay, we're green, we're using hydro. Well, yeah, you may be green, but it's not okay because we need the hydro that we have to replace the fossil fuels that we're using, not to divert it off to some energy inefficient kind of processing. Some will say that they'll use excess wind or solar, that they'll situate themselves out by a wind farm that has to shut down. Well, I'll tell you, wind farms right now have to shut down because the transmission lines can't carry the load when they spin and produce a lot of electricity. What that means is that we need to make transmission upgrades. There are also times where they may be spinning and the transmission lines are okay, but there just isn't as much use for that electricity. There's not as much demand. Well, what we need to be doing is putting that wind or solar power into storage. This green line in this graph shows how our energy use changes through the day. So we're asleep, we get up in the morning, we're cooking breakfast, taking our shower, it goes up. We leave home, we go to work, it goes down. We come home at the end of the day and, we're cooking, whatever we're doing, we're using more energy, especially in a hot afternoon, and then our energy use comes down again. Well, that doesn't exactly correspond to wind that blows hard at night and isn't so active during the day. And we've already seen that it doesn't really correspond either with the sun. So this graph down here shows the variability over 30 days of winter and how the light and the dark green are the onshore and offshore wind. The yellow is solar. The red is short-term storage and the gray is long-term storage. Down below, we see the hydro and the nuclear and the imported power that is needed to provide what's called baseload. But all the rest of this is intermittent. A cloud comes in, goes out. It's a crappy day. There's no wind here. There was no wind for a week. It's just unrealistic that any crypto miner is going to be willing to be shut down for a week and, turn on and off when the sun comes and goes and the wind starts and stops. It's nonsense. We'll spend the next slide talking about carbon offsets. So I won't take the time here, but just to say that there's a special place in hell for carbon offsets, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There's other plants that say they're going to convert to renewable gas or to hydrogen and burn those as fuels. Well, you know, first of all, there's limited supply of renewable gas, and when you burn it, you're still releasing greenhouse gases and nitrous oxides, which create smog. And the same thing with hydrogen. It's often made from fossil fuels. It's costly, inefficient use of renewables to make it that way, and when you burn it, you still get smog. So none of those are suitable directions to go. So now to talk about carbon budgets and carbon offsets. There's a finite amount of additional greenhouse gas that we can add to the atmosphere before we reach climate change tipping points. So I've kind of stolen this graphic of, you know, probably a very cheerful idea of your cup running over. But the reality is that we can only add, according to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC is referenced here, that we can only add 500 more gigatons before our cup runneth over, before we have maxed out the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that our atmosphere can hold before we have tipping points. And that was a limit that they established in 2020. Right now, and you can see that in this graph, we are emitting 50 gigatons a year. That means at this rate, and you know, 2 years are already gone since 2020, we've got just 8 more years in our carbon budget before we reach tipping points, which means we've got to start reducing our emissions along this pathway, not delaying our emissions with carbon offsets and carbon capture technology, because all of that pushes us beyond the tipping point out here. So we've got to change, and we can't just use carbon offsets. So carbon offsetting is the act of paying others to reduce your own emissions or to absorb the CO2 to compensate for your emissions. It's honestly, it's a greenwashing, pollute now, pay later, business as usual scheme. It's not a viable solution. We need to significantly and in genuine real terms reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible. I'm not against planting trees, but we have to be realistic. Growing trees takes a long time to offset the emissions, and there is just simply no way that we can plant enough trees fast enough to offset all of the emissions and the 50 gigatons of pollutants that we're putting in the atmosphere every year. Further, droughts, floods, fires have made this strategy very uncertain to produce the results that we want. Further, so some people will do renewables or offsets by installing renewables in developing countries. But that also doesn't reduce our emissions, and it doesn't reduce the load on our grid. And if they're going to install renewables as a so-called offset, why aren't they just building those renewables here? There's also the idea of carbon capture and sequestration, which is experimental and costly. And the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act does not even allow offsets from power plants. So in sum, upstate New York is facing a proof of work Bitcoin mining explosion. The proof of work blockchain mining consumes astronomical amounts of energy. Some proof of work operations increase greenhouse gas emissions. Others divert clean energy resources from offsetting fossil fuels. Proof of work mining will interfere with meeting our greenhouse gas reduction and renewable energy goals, and it is unsustainable. On the other hand, proof of stake blockchain mining is a much more energy efficient process. It shows promise and actually is already being used in smart contract applications and for some types of cryptocurrency. So overall, what I want to caution people is that blockchain is a nascent industry, and it has some, I think, revolutionary, I would probably strengthen the word beneficial to say revolutionary potential. But we need to be careful. And in my opinion, we need to hang on to the blockchain baby, but throw out the Bitcoin proof of work bathwater, which is just phenomenally destructive. So I want to finish this talk, and I'm going to ask my hosts at this point if they would please put this first link in the chat for people to sign on to. This is a link that will take you to a letter to the governor asking her to issue a moratorium on all proof of work mining operations in New York. You can also, if you're, inclined, call Governor Hochul and ask for the same thing, and there's a toll-free line to do that. And the last is I would ask you to talk to your friends and family and share this video. I do want to just give a hat tip to nobody involved in the kind of effort and movement building that we're doing does it alone. And there have just been some really stalwart supporters who have educated me and helped me, and all working together, I think we're going to get there. Earth Justice has provided the legal guidance that we all need, and thanks to them. Seneca Lake Guardian has been amazing at rallying support and bringing the media attention to this super important issue. And our own assembly member here from the Tompkins County, Portland area, Assembly Member Anna Kellis, who has in her freshman year as a legislator just gone gangbusters and put forward a bill to establish a moratorium on fossil fuel-based blockchain operations. That bill was passed in the Senate, and we're still fighting for it to be passed in the Assembly. So one of the actions you can take would be to contact your legislators and ask them to support Anna's bill. Last, I do just want to mention a couple of related events that people may be interested in. And I'd say to my hosts, if you could please put this information in the chat too. There will be a presentation with the Seneca Lake Guardian and Frac Tracker and System Change, not Climate Change, will be doing an event this coming Saturday on crypto and the challenges that it presents to our climate, and also, well, as you can see by the title, there are some other issues that I didn't get into depth here on that I think that they'll tackle in a quite thought-provoking way. And then there will be further discussion of real zero carbon emissions versus net zero and the difference meaning everything. So I'd encourage you to also join into those webinars as well as ways to get involved. But really, for now, from my view, the most important thing you can do is to send this letter to Governor Hochul. And so if I could again ask everybody, I'll just leave this up for a minute longer, to please take a minute out of this webinar and write this down, or just go and hop over and click on that link in the chat to be able to sign this letter to Governor Hochul, asking her to issue a moratorium. All right, I think with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and see who's left out there, because I have no idea.
Thank you so much, Irene. Carl Sagan once said, quote, "The cure for a fallacious argument is a better argument, not the suppression of ideas," unquote. And I think the motivation of some of those who may have Zoom bombed us tonight is to make money irregardless of the cost to climate. Their goal was to obfuscate our message. But the harder you try to suppress the truth, the more inevitable it is that we'll find a way to come out. And I do think that this issue is something that many people didn't really know much about until recently. And now that cryptocurrency makers are feeling some heat, I think that, this is kind of the result. So I really want to thank you, Irene, for enlightening us as a group. There have been several questions asking for clarification on a couple of things, if I can field them to you. For example, one was just asking more about the goal of 70% by 2030. Is that that's just for electric sector, right?
That's 70% renewable energy. Yes, so that's the electric sector. There are different goals for, well, and by, I think it's 2035, we have to have a 40% reduction in our greenhouse gases. So that would include transportation and buildings.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And another question is it possible for Bitcoin and other cryptos to switch from proof of work to proof of stake?
I'm not an expert on this, but I have asked people who are, and I'll try to do justice to their answer. There is one cryptocurrency that is currently in the process of doing that. It's called Ethereum. It has not been a short or easy process for them. They have been talking about doing this for years and, making headway, and then somehow it doesn't happen. The latest deadline that they've said is that they'll be to proof of stake by 2022. So we'll see if they deliver on that promise. And I will say, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but others have told me that virtually all of the newer cryptocurrencies that are being introduced, and again, there's 6,000 of them, and literally people are introducing new cryptocurrencies every day. But that the newer ones are all, virtually all being built on proof of stake rather than proof of work methods.
Very good. Well, we also have a comment from Vanessa I'd like to share. She said, so following a supply and demand economic model, as demand for more electricity rises, such as through crypto mining, the cost for everyone goes up of that electricity.
Yeah, I think that that's right.
Yes. Yeah, as people have other questions from tonight, please do pop them in the chat to us as the hosts, and we will be happy to field them. We are getting gratitude from some of the participants that I'm grateful for your presentation, Irene. A comment by Bill says, I just don't see how cryptocurrencies can be functional currencies. Volatility is bad for currencies, but good for speculators. Bitcoin is super volatile. A question from David is, can proof of work method be outlawed in favor of proof of stake?
I think that I should add to the list of things I'm not. I'm also not an attorney. So I don't want to give a definitive answer to that. I believe that it is possible for the governor to issue a moratorium on proof of work mining in a way that's similar to her having issued a moratorium on, or not she did, but Governor Patterson did on fracking some years ago. Governor Patterson used an executive order to issue a moratorium on fracking while further study was undertaken as to the impacts. And I think that the governor could certainly do that. And again, I shouldn't say certainly, I think that the governor, and some others that I've consulted with think that the governor can do that. The answer remains to be seen. It's certainly what we asked for in the letter to the governor that I've asked you to all sign on to, is for her to issue an executive order putting a moratorium on creep of work. And so I'd urge you again, and I'll put that in the chat again.
Thank you. We also have another question from Sandy. She says, how much is the reduction in energy for proof of stake compared to proof of work? Would proof of stake also become energy hungry in the future with growth?
It's on the order of several orders of magnitude, I believe. I think it's over 1,000 times and possibly even 10,000 times reduction in the energy use. So it's very substantial.
Irene, would you like me to click on these links just so people can see what that looks like?
See what looks like in the chat.
Links, the letter to
No,
Governor.
what I really want is for people themselves to do that.
Absolutely, yes. And as people's, it's always helpful when we can tailor our letters to be more specific. Where is the best place that people can just get more information? I mean, it might be a tough topic to get through the weeds to get to the kind of details that we would want. Any suggestions in that regard?
I think I heard two questions.
Yes, perhaps.
So one is how can people stay in touch and informed and learn more actions to take? And I would encourage you that if you're inclined and want to learn more and stay in touch, to sign this letter to Governor Hochul, and we'll have your contact information and can provide you with updated information about other actions to take. There actually are going to be any number of things coming up soon. There's the DigitHost power plant, or the Fortistar power plant out in the area near Niagara Falls, north Tonawanda, that is looking to convert to doing more crypto mining. They're right now operating as a gas peaker plant. And so both the Public Service Commission and the DEC are going to have to weigh in on that. And so we will be sending letters and making noise there. We are also, looking at some other strategies going forward on some of the other plants, and looking forward to hearing what the DEC is going to do next on the Greenwich power plant, because we expect a decision on that, hopefully before Christmas. And yes, so thank you. Somebody just put in the chat. There's also a dedicated phone line to call Governor Hochul to ask her for a moratorium. So there's the phone number there in the chat to take that action as well. I think I had that on my slide also. But yeah, I would really urge you to sign the letter to Governor Hochul, because that will be a way for us to stay in touch with you and inform you of other actions you can take.
Yes, and the whole point of these meetups is to be solution focused. You've educated us, but now we can be part of the solution by reaching out and being active on this issue. So that's appreciated. I have a message here from Abby. She says, so thankful you had this. I think she speaks for many here. She said, I'm working closely with you, Irene, and Greenwich.
Yes.
In the town where they have a lake home. And so this is near and dear to her heart. And she said, I used to think that this was a local issue, but she understands now it is a global issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is a global issue.
So I do think it is an issue too that to just bring up with friends and family, this may be something that a lot of people don't know about, but when you start to give them a sense of what the implications are, even if they've never had any interest whatsoever in buying, for example, cryptocurrency, to understand that this business does affect us all. So it is important to become educated about.
Yeah.
Getting a question here from Fred. Can crypto be regulated by government? I know you said you're not an attorney, but what would be your take on that from what you know?
Crypto actually, there, because of a lot of the consumer protection concerns and taxation concerns and some of the other financial exchange issues, the U.S. government, the SEC are looking into possible ways to regulate. But meanwhile, this was kind of interesting, is that New York State has some of the strictest regulations overall on the industry, much more so related to consumer protection concerns and taxing and that sort of thing. But we are hopeful and looking for ways that the state will be able to, in some ways, manage this as well, whether it's through energy efficiency requirements per transaction, or one of the things that the Public Service Commission did as prices were escalating in some municipal electric cooperatives here, is they were able to adjust the rates to not allow crypto miners to have access to the same rates as the residents of those municipalities did. So there are some options, and we're looking to figure out which are the ones that are going to work. And we hope, that we'll be able to work with the governor's office to achieve the kind of results that we need to protect New Yorkers and to protect our environment.
Excellent. And I've just shared in the chat a message from Abby with a one-page fact sheet that can be shared with the links so that you can get more background information.
Great.
Excellent. We also have a message here from Seneca Lake Guardian that you can sign up for email updates, and that would be by going to www.senecalakeguardian.org to sign up email updates.
Great.
Yes.
And I think they're also, active on social media as well, and can be found there through Facebook page and whatnot.
I am mindful of the time. We usually try to keep these presentations to 90 minutes, so we are nearing that time. I do want to use this opportunity to mention that every month we also have a Climate Smart book club. We cover a lot of great books, and I want to kind of put a plug for the next one that we have. It's called Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. I'm trying to share it, but obviously my screen's not allowing me to do that, but it's narrated by Paul Hawken. Most of you know that name from Drawdown. So I kind of look at this as a drawdown. Drawdown kind of laid out the problem and the percentages of the impact of various contributors to climate change, but Regeneration is really a compendium of solutions, and I would recommend the book. It is not one that needs to be read from cover to cover to gain interest. You can absolutely pick and choose different chapters to get more information. And I'm going to dig in here and see if there's anything in this book yet on cryptocurrency, as I don't know the answer. But again, that's Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation by Paul Hawken. And that Climate Smart Book Club is always the third Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And for this month, that would be Tuesday, December 21st. And I always send out those links for both this meetup and the book club in our Climate Smart newsletter for New Paltz. So if you want to be added to that, mailing list, please do make sure that we have your email. You can zip it to us as the host in the chat. And I'm just going to see if there was any last remaining questions. We have kudos to all those who put this together. Thank you very much. Thank you especially to Irene, who spent an enormous amount of time on the information presented.